New measures are expected, giving financial support to self-employed people and freelancers. The Chancellor will unveil a package of help later after criticism that millions had lost income because of coronavirus.
I immediately went from earning to not earning, whereas people I know that are employed still, they're still getting their salary.
It's not clear whether all self-employed people who will be eligible for help will have more on what's expected. Also this lunchtime. As NHS staff say they need more protective equipment, the Army helps with the distribution of medical supplies. The death toll in the United States goes over 1,000. Also, we have exclusive access to South Korea's intensive care units and see how the country is managing to bring down infection rates.
Do you need anything at all, Brenda?
And the challenges of living through lockdown at the top of a tower block.
And in sport, the task of rearranging the Olympics begins. It's back to the drawing board for some events.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to the BBC News at 1. The Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, is preparing to unveil a package of emergency measures for self-employed people, many of whose income has dried up because of the economic shutdown caused by coronavirus. There are more than 5 million self-employed people in the UK, although there are suggestions that not all of them will be eligible for this help. Last week, the Chancellor promised to cover up to 80% of the wages of employees to stop them from being laid off. In the health service, there is still a huge need for ventilators. The NHS has about 8,000, but 30,000 could be needed within just a few weeks. The infection rate in the United States has soared, and more than 1,000 people there have now died. And here, we are all being encouraged to stand on our doorstep at 8 o'clock this evening and join in a round of applause to say thank you to all the healthcare staff who are working throughout this pandemic. Our first report this lunchtime about the Chancellor's latest measures comes from our economics correspondent Andy Verity.
The country's 5 million self-employed people have never known anything like this. The government orders a shutdown and their income plummets, in many cases to zero. Nikki, a nail technician, has enough money in the bank to get her through the next month, but then she'll run out.
I immediately went from earning to not earning, whereas people I know that are employed still, they're still getting their salaries.
Thomas Westcott is a self-employed plasterer, but yesterday his work dried up.
A very worrying time at the moment due to all the customers cancelling, not being able to get materials for the jobs that we do have. And it's also very unclear whether we should be carrying on working or not. And no money coming in either.
Charlie Knight makes costumes for prime-time TV shows, an industry stripped bare by the antivirus measures.
It's terrifying, really, because as an industry, we're not just costume designers and makeup artists. We are carpenters, we are riggers, we are electricians, we are painters, we are medics, we are every possible profession you could think of is within our industry.
Cabbies know work comes and goes. For some, this is their fourth recession, but they say it's by far the worst.
Apprehensive, especially when the work has dried up on the streets, the hotels, the restaurants, the bars. There's just nothing out there at the moment. Cab drivers are having to rank up on near supermarkets because they're the only places where customers can be had.
Millions of self-employed people have seen a drop in income, the like of which most of them can't remember in their entire working lives. It's estimated that they've lost £781 a month on average. Rishi Sunak's promised to help firms and their employees, paying 80% of wage bills that firms can't afford, and the self-employed want the same. The Treasury's been keen to avoid giving money to people who don't need it, but many are by no means wealthy.
People who are taxi drivers, who are hairdressers, who are cleaners, who are builders, they just haven't got any money coming in. So speed speed is going to be important. I think it needs to be a scheme which is as generous to the self-employed as the Chancellor was rightly to employees.
Support for the incomes of self-employed people, even if it's temporary, will land the government with a giant bill. Billions, perhaps tens of billions. The longer the shutdown goes on, the more the national debt will grow. Andy Verity, BBC News.
And let's get more from our assistant political editor, Norman Smith. And I mean, the government really under pressure really has to come up with something for self-employed people, Norman.
Jane, they've got to come up with something that is big, but perhaps more importantly, quick. Big because there are 5 million self-employed who at the moment haven't been offered much beyond going on benefits. Now, the Prime Minister has said the scheme will offer them parity with employees who were given 80% of their wages guaranteed. So it is going to involve billions and billions, but it really has to be quick because we have seen a surge in unemployment, around 500,000 more people claiming universal credit in the last week. And what we've learned today is that it is the self-employed who are particularly at risk of working in those sectors where demand has collapsed or they're facing restrictions or even closures. So working as hairdressers or taxi drivers or cleaners. And indeed, the Institute for Fiscal Studies today calculated that up to 1 million of the country's 5 million self-employed could be working in those at-risk sectors. The difficulty is in devising a scheme for the self-employed. Well, it's hugely complex because their incomes go up and down depending on profit levels, and they're a hugely varied bunch. They range from mega wealthy football stars and media celebrities down to someone eking out a living selling knitting needles on the internet. But that is the challenge the Chancellor faces, to come up with something that will be deliverable on the ground quickly to safeguard jobs.
Norman, for now, thank you. Norman Smith. Let's turn to the situation in the United States because the infection rate there has surged with almost 70